All right, there we go. So once again, my name is Anthony David Jr., and today we will be talking about the Environmental Justice Amendment Act of 2023. So before we get started, this is our agenda today. So first, I would like to get to know everyone that's joining us today. So if you can introduce yourself in the chat, I would greatly appreciate it. If you're part of any organization or if you want to represent your ward, please feel free to add that information as well. We will also be overviewing the bill, just all the kinks of the bill, and also updating you all on our campaign to shut down the national engineering products located in Ivy City. Towards the end, we'll have a Q&A discussion. We are also joined here today with Connor Shaw, who is a member of Zachary Parker's office. So he could definitely help to answer any questions related to the bill. And lastly, we will prep for our March 18th council hearing. So again, this bill will be, the hearing for this bill is on March 18th. So please remember to sign up today. I know that the hearing registration will close tomorrow. So please, if you're interested in testifying, to sign up today as soon as possible. We will be dropping the link in the chat as well, and also going over the different ways to sign up and submit testimony. And then we'll also be uh, talking about some other next steps that we will be posting in our upcoming months. But before we get started, just a little bit about us. We are Empower DC. We are a grassroots organization who
Good,
focuses
thank you.
on, community development. Thank you for joining us today. We are trying to build confidence and self-advocacy and build collective power within our residents district-wide, and really trying to advance systemic change within our district. Some of our work focuses on housing justice, which looks at, displacement prevention, public housing needs and housing policies as well. Looking at equitable development, which looks at our zoning and public land issues, and also as it relates to the Cornell School in Ivy City, and also citywide as well, and other planning initiatives related to the comprehensive plans and small area plans. And lastly, our environmental justice work, which is me, which we're looking at, working with residents in the Brentwood community, Ivy City community, and really spearheading our EJ coalition, our DC EJ coalition, while also addressing some of our industrial land and air quality issues, and also promoting this EJ policy, which is the Environmental Justice Amendment Act of 2023. But again, before we dive a little bit into the bill, I kind of wanted to, go over what environmental justice is. We've been hearing this term a lot, especially as it relates to our work. And, the EPA kind of defines environmental justice as is when, all communities have full access and are protected from disproportionate, health impacts to human health, but also our environment, our environmental health, trying to making sure that all of our communities are protected from different hazards related to climate change
Oh, it's
and
also being recorded.
cumulative impacts as well, and other social burdens. Lastly, trying to address legacy racism and structural systemic barriers. So this is coming from our federal government and looking at equitable access to a healthy and sustainable and resilient environments, so we could, live, work, and play within our environments, really, and really have a symbiotic, relationships with our environments as well. When looking at another piece of work, when defining environmental justice, the 17 principles of environmental justice. These are principles that were created by groups of people of color in the early 2000s to kind of define what environmental justice looks like, nationwide. And, I kind of summarize, these aren't the actual points. I summarize all 17 points because we will be here all day trying to dissect all 17. But basically what they're trying to get at is that environmental justice advocates for equitable policies to protect all of our ecosystems and ensure freedom of environmental harm, as mentioned before. And it demands, fair participation in all decision-making processes making sure that our workers are safe, our communities are safe, and oppose any types of exploitation from corporations and private entities, but also our government as well. Lastly, environmental justice calls for reparations of our victims who have been disproportionately impacted and recognizes the indigenous sovereignties and promotes individual responsibility for sustainable living. So really getting at that we all, need to make sure that we're all protected from all types of environmental harms and making sure that, we are well respected within our communities and that we are showing up and having every seat at the table when it comes to how our environment is being impacted. So now it's time to get into our legislation and why we're all here today, which is the Environmental Justice Bill of 2023. So just another reminder that the hearing for this bill is on Monday. So please, please, please register to testify today if you are interested. And you can also submit testimony, after the hearing if you choose to do like a written or recorded one as well. And, the main purpose of this bill is to really mandate cumulative impact analysis for facilities that are located or impact overburdened communities. And we'll talk about a little more what overburdened communities really are. And this is something that is defined by the CDC's, which is the Center of Disease Control's Environmental Justice Index. So we'll kind of break down what that looks like. This bill will make sure that it will be difficult to build or expand or re-permit polluting facilities in neighborhoods that are overburdened by pollutions. So, looking at kind of the compounded impacts of a lot of these major and minor facilities within certain communities. And once again, this bill was introduced by Councilmember Zachary Parker of Ward 5. So he is our champion for this bill. So, going back to, what is an overburdened community and how it's defined. So when looking at the Environmental Justice Index of the CDC, they have a couple of different factors as it relates to what makes up an environmental justice or an overburdened community. They look at things like social vulnerability, which are related to racial and ethnic minority status, looking at socioeconomic statuses, looking at household characteristics and housing types. And within these different categories, there's also, subcategories towards this, looking at languages spoken in the house or looking at insurance policies that a different household has, the amount of education that a household has. These are all compounding factors of what social vulnerability looks like. Next, when looking at environmental burdens, looking at air pollutions and other environmental hazards within the community, looking at the built environment and transportation infrastructure as it relates to a particular community, and addressing the water pollution within that community as well. And lastly, looking at health vulnerabilities, which is the last characteristics, which looks at pre-existing chronic disease and burdens within the community. So looking at, the amount of asthma rates that are in the community, looking at the rates of diabetes as well. These are all different factors that this tool indicates and compiles to give a score for a specific community. So as we can see, in the darker green is where we have high concentrations of overburdened communities. And a lot of this darker green is located in areas like wards 5, 7, and 8. So next, Ms. Sabrina will talk about why this bill is necessary for our DC community. But before we get into that, I just wanted to say that cumulative impacts is something that is fairly new nationwide. This is something that, a lot of states across our countries are starting to, catch up to or hop onto. About 3 states right now, which are New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts, have already enacted legislations related to cumulative impacts. 13 states in total have some sorts of, incorporation of cumulative impacts, either it be through legislations or mapping tools or different agency guidance. These are all, fairly new things. So this is definitely something that's urgent for our DC community. So now I would like to pass it to Ms. Sabrina to talk about why it's necessary for us.
Thank you, Anthony. And also, everyone, please sign up to testify. Now, as we all know, over 50% of the industrial land is in Ward 5, although environmental racism is in Wards 5, 7, and 8. The district they continue to put polluters in our already overburdened communities. So instead of reacting about the negative effects the polluting industries cause, we will be part of the process. That's what this bill will do, have us be part of the process of protecting our community, protecting our health, and protecting our quality of life. The Environmental Justice Act of 2023 bill will create a process that recognizes the stressors currently impacting us and the stressors an industry will place on a community.
All right, thank you so much. So next, as Miss Sabrina just said, that, a lot of these industrial sites are located within wards 5, 7, and 8. So as you can see on the map on the left, that's looking at our industrial zones. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Looking at our industrial zones within our city. So, looking at the statistics, only 5% of our total city is zoned industrial, and out of that 5%, and which is a fairly small amount, but out of that 5%, 50% of those industrial sites are located in Ward 5. And, this has become super dangerous as when looking at, climate change and looking at different environmental impacts, we certain communities are experiencing a urban heat island effect, which means that they are experiencing disproportionate heat or temperatures compared to other communities in our district. They lack green space coverage to help mitigate, some of those chemicals and also help to mitigate the heat. And, some neighborhoods are seeing from 10 to 20 degrees, rises in temperatures compared to, other neighborhoods. So this is definitely something that we need to address. And a lot of this is due to the concentration of facilities, which we'll talk about some specific examples later on in our presentation. So again, when looking at this cumulative impact assessment, this will be a mandatory process, for major actions and substantial negative environmental impacts. Again, if it's a facility that's inside of an overburdened community or if they are impacting an overburdened community. So again, chemicals travel, pollutants travel. So this could be a facility that is just outside of a neighborhood as well. It's also required for other actions in applicable facilities and overburdened communities. So that's what I just said. And requires certain plans developed by the District of Columbia to undergo an enhanced environmental review when those plans impact overburdened communities. And this is something that is super positive because the DC government facilities could be one of our biggest polluters. And I'll show you some examples of that, in specific communities. When looking at this process, it can be completed as a supplemental to the environmental impact statement if already required in certain situations. Disapproval is required for actions with disproportionate impacts unless mitigation measures are proposed. So if it's a facility that has huge negative impacts that they found within the cumulative impact statement, they will not be able to, move forward unless they propose, ways that will help alleviate some of those environmental stressors. And no agency, and if they do receive, a no, or say like during that process, it comes out that this is a facility that, has those negative impacts, no agency funds will be spent without council approval for actions that has disproportionate impacts. So until they figure out, how to deal with that facility and lower those impacts, then the council will not spend money on the particular project. So when looking at the different types of facilities that the cumulative impact statement will undergo, like I said before, any major sources of air pollutions, any small or large generators or transporters, sludge and incinerator processors, large sewer treatment plants, scrap metals, transfer stations, recycling facilities, it's really getting at, a lot of different areas. I think one thing to note as well is surface parking lots as well is something that would also be considered. And any bus depot or yeah, or large industrial truck depots and storage facilities with heavy machineries as well. So next, Mr. Bruno will be talking about a specific facility that our work really looks at.
The National Engineering Products is located here in Ivy City, 1950 Capitol Avenue, Northeast. Now, DOEE Air Quality Division was not aware this pollutant facility existed until a couple of years ago. It's been operating unpermitted for decades, and it's a relic of environmental racism. It was also grandfathered in, and it's allowed to operate despite zoning law changes. Also, neighbors have experienced loss of taste and smell. They use cancer-causing chemicals, what we've been yelling about for years. They manufacture their adhesive and have done so since the 30s with no oversight or air quality permit. Even as DOEE and the EPA have done their tests, and the air where some of the results indicated that the levels were high, they're still making this adhesive to today. They're still operating today. So this is a prime example of systemic and environmental racism, neglect, and injustice. Now, some of the chemicals that they're using, and it's chemicals of concern because they are toxic. They're using formaldehyde. They're using Cresol. Now, if anyone has been in the area and you smell burning tar, that's the Cresol chemical that you smell. Also, the other chemicals of concern is acetonitrile, which is cancer causing, methylene chloride, which is cancer causing, and the phenols. So now, DOEE, they had a hearing just recently, and the director of DOEE, Richard Jackson, his response was disgusting and pretty much just swept it under the rug and just said it's not dangerous and they can just stay here. He also mentioned that he washed his hands in benzene. So now we're getting ready to listen to a clip from that hearing, and you'll hear for yourself.
I want to shift gears to Ivy City, and the National Engineering Products Facility, for those watching, is a chemical plant that has long operated without appropriate permits, and it has been found to emit toxic chemicals. You disagree with that assessment?
Correct. So this is one thing I always state, right? I've been playing in chemicals since I was in high school. I love chemicals. Bathe in them, do everything. I've worked in the chemical industry.
You bathe in chemicals?
Hey, I used to wash my hands with benzene in lab class, right? That's what you did back in the day. But I worked in chemical plants. I've worked in chemical plants for a very long time, almost half my life. So I know what a chemical plant is. NEP is not a chemical plant. It's a manufacturing facility.
Okay.
They bring in compounds, they produce a sealant, and then that sealant is shipped out. But it doesn't produce chemicals. That's my point. It's not a chemical plant because a chemical plant produces chemicals.
But the EPA and DOEE have found them to emit dangerous chemicals.
Okay. So our upcoming actions to shut down the National Engineering Products. Again, please sign up to testify at the hearing that's coming up this Monday, March 18th. So NEP submitted their odor control plan to DOEE, which didn't meet requirements set out by the regulations. and was incomplete despite receiving extensions. In response to the inadequate plan, we are calling on DOEE to issue a cease and desist against the company, forcing it to cease operations like yesterday. Please echo our call. Please echo our call for the cease and desist. Look out for an email and an online action coming soon. Also, the eminent domain for the facility, Councilmember Parker has committed to introducing legislation to authorize use of eminent domain to close the facility and repurpose it for a community benefiting use. We are requesting funding for the eminent domain action in the budget. If DOEE does not act before then, y'all already know what's going to happen. We will hold an action on March 29th at the DOEE budget hearing. Let us know if you would like to participate. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, Sabrina. Now, let's talk about Brentwood as it relates to this. Like we said before, Ward 5 holds 50% of industrial sites within our city. So like I said, our district government could be one of our biggest polluters within our city. As you can see, this is a map of Brentwood, and the blue area is residential. The red area is industrial. So out of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 facilities, all located along W Street right here. These are all district agency facilities in Brentwood. And, all of the surrounding facilities are private facilities, but, this is something that the cumulative impact assessment will help us to prevent from allowing multiple facilities to just be concentrated within a certain area. This is something that should not be happening. This is something that it has been happening for many and many generations. Now is really time to say enough is enough. So, due to the concentration of these industrial sites, Brentwood is in the 89th percentile of low life expectancy in our country. When looking at DC specifically, Brentwood is in the 95th percentile of asthma rates. About 2 years ago, Empower DC conducted a health impact assessment for the Brentwood neighborhood. We had about 102 respondents of this survey. About 71% of respondents believe that air pollution either somewhat or very much affected their health. 54% of respondents believe that they feel uncomfortable or very uncomfortable opening their windows due to air quality concerns. Residents have reported buildup of soot on their windows, dust kicking up from the industrial sites, specifically the W Street bus terminal. There's just a lot of different issues that our Brentwood residents are facing due to the mass concentration of these industrial sites. So next, I would like to show you all our Justice for Brentwood video campaign that we had narrated by Sharon Edwards, which is one of our Brentwood residents. She did an amazing job on this video. So I'd like to show you all for yourselves.
I lived in Brentwood for 26 years in the same place. When I first moved here, it was ideal for my kids. The traffic was manageable and they could easily cross the streets to get to school. But now, traffic situation is terrible. Industrial facilities, more cars, more trucks have come onto our streets. The streets are narrow, the signs are not clear, and it makes it difficult to navigate. It's not safe for our seniors. Our visitors have no place to park. It is horrible to live in Brentwood. Bad lighting. There's a risk of accidents with drivers that's frustrated and blocking the intersection. The city is planning to add a bus terminal right next to our neighborhood, which they say will not affect us, but that's not true. There's only one street that they will enter in, the terminal. And that street is also narrow, and it would be extremely frustrating for surrounding neighbors to get home and for emergency vehicles to get through. We're fighting to protect our community, our businesses, and our children. We don't want the city to dump everything into Brentwood, as we're already dealing with industrial sites which have brought so much traffic and environmental issues. We need a solution that will be fair for all communities, not just Brentwood. We used to be a family-oriented neighborhood where kids can go outside and play, ride their bikes, and have cookouts. But now, with all the dump trucks, construction equipment, and government trucks, it's hard to call this a home. I used to feel safe sitting on my porch, talking to my neighbors, but now it doesn't feel the same. I don't want my grandkids around in here because of the trucks driving through, the terrible smell. We need to rethink the bus terminal, not dump everything into Brentwood. Join us, stand up for Brentwood. Together, we can protect our neighborhood and keep it safe and thrive for generations to come.
Great. So as you all can see, this is truly a concern. This is something that we definitely need to, make sure that we're voicing our opinions about, for all communities across our district. So again, I definitely urge you all to please, please, please register to testify today if you have something to say about these issues. Moving forward with the cumulative impact statement, looking at public participation within this process, the cumulative impact statement will be available for public review, and agencies must take public comment for each assessment. And public hearings are required for any major actions within the overburdened communities or near it as well. And any 25 members of a single member district can request a hearing for any of these sites, but also if there's any significant public interest. But there are some facilities that have some exemptions for this process. So actions exempted are if they reduce disproportionate impacts.
How's everybody?
Good. How are you? Thank you for joining us. Please mute yourself while we're going through this. We'll have questions at the end. So impacts without extending facility lifetime or significant increasing capacity. Other exemptions are related to any changes in the environmental laws as well. And lastly, if any particular facility provides a substantial direct benefit to overburdened communities as well. Not lastly, the next aspect of this bill is the enforcement piece. So the mayor may fine any applicant or revoke any action within a district if their mitigation measures or conditions or operations fail to, if they fail to comply within, those mitigation measures identified within the cumulative impact statement. And also the Office of the People's Counsel may initiate any civil actions on behalf of any individuals of legal wrongs suffered in the preparation or disposition of any environmental impact statement or cumulative impacts assessments. So the Office of the People's Counsel will hold these agencies and different applicants, responsible, especially if residents have any concern. So they are enforcers when dealing with these facilities as well. Lastly, the last aspect of this bill looks at the creation of a environmental justice division within DOEE. So what this division will do will alleviate any environmental, energy, or climate-related health burdens in DC's overburdened communities. It will lead any integration of energy justice and environmental justice processes in all aspects of DOEE. So making sure that EJ is a priority for any resource allocations and making sure that is, thought of within all aspects of agency, operations, and ensure that community participation is enforced and enforces any of the environmental laws as well, and ensures that there is an equitable deployment of clean energy, minimizing environmental impacts, and maintaining access to reliable and affordable energy. Although we are, super grateful for this bill and definitely want to uplift it, throughout the hearing processes. So again, I do, want you all who are interested to register today for that hearing on Monday. We also want to, identify some areas that can be strengthened within the bill during the markup process after. So we definitely want to make sure that the Office of the People's Counsel is fully funded through their expanded authority to serve in our districts and to serve our consumers. So making sure that, they have the proper, resources to expand their office to get the experts that they need. Because they don't usually haven't done this type of work in the past. So making sure that they, get everything that they need to ensure this. We would like to strengthen and clearly define the community engagement process within the bill as well. So making sure that that public participation process of the cumulative impact statement is well thought out and well defined to ensure that, DOEE and our other applying applicants are making sure that there is community outreach, to making sure that they are doing the proper public hearings and the proper, public comment periods, and making sure that residents are well notified. We would like to also make sure that this cumulative impact statement addresses the existing conditions in overburdened communities, including identifying facilities that may be operating either illegally and the harmful impact of DC government facilities as well. So again, holding our own district accountable for some of the facilities that are operating currently under, their guidance, but also, trying to figure out where those harmful areas are, like we said before, some of these facilities are grandfathered in, such as the National Engineering Products. Were not aware of this facility until about 2 years ago. So again, making sure that DOEE is going through our city with a fine-tooth comb to identify these facilities, but also incorporating demolition as a major action within the cumulative impact statement, because demolition also impacts our air, will also impact our residents as well. So making sure that that's also a part of it. And lastly, creating a interagency council on environmental justice to ensure cross-agency and public involvement in shaping environmental justice goals and actions. So, some of these major projects, and sometimes even our DC government projects, there's a lot of different agencies that are at play, taking the Aussie bus terminal, for example, in Brentwood, you have the school districts that's at play, you have DGS that's at play, you have DOEE that's at play. And, if none of these agencies are talking to each other, then how can we properly, hold people accountable and properly know that they understand what our environmental laws and regulations are? So these are some of the things that, we would like to strengthen as a part of the bill. So next, once again, please, 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 please register today. If you are interested in testifying, if you are unavailable to testify, so this is the link to register. I think Brisa is dropping it in the chat. It's at the DC Council website. If you look at your upper right, once you access the hearing management system, and once you have found the hearing, which will be under the Transportation and the Environment Committee. So if you look on March 18th, it should be there. You will click on it, and then you will look into your top right. You can either register to testify today, which I hope you all will be clicking today, or you could, if you're not available on March 18th, you can also submit testimony, either a written testimony, or you can pre-record yourself and upload that as well. So again, the hearing is on the 18th, and you can register today. I think the deadline for registration will close tomorrow evening, so please make sure you do that as soon as possible. So now we would like to open the floor for any questions you all may have. I haven't really been looking at the chat, so I don't know if there's any that's already in the chat, but please feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you if you have any questions about anything related to this in our work.
Anthony, we have Ms. Rogers has asked in the chat if this legislation can do anything, excuse me, to address slum landlords, take on slum landlords who've allowed properties to deteriorate, and to require them to update buildings that don't have updated systems to keep the housing conditions healthy. And that's a great question. I'm not aware of any connection. Well, maybe we can ask Connor if he's identified any connections with the environmental assessment or the cumulative impact statement and housing. Is there any connection to housing, Connor?
It's a good question. I don't think this bill directly tackles that problem. It would be the case that, underlying community health vulnerabilities, as Anthony discussed, that are caused by poor housing conditions would make certain communities more likely to be defined as overburdened and therefore subject to the provisions of this bill. But this bill is not meant to address some of the really serious housing code violations we know are there. The council does have other ways to get at that problem, including through oversight of DHCD or our housing authority. We'd be looking to work through those channels rather than this bill to address that challenge.
It would apply to certain types of development. Is that correct?
Yes, major action is a term of art that already exists in our code, and it's essentially any request of government permission. It could be a permit, it could be a zoning application that involves a project over $1 million, I think in like 1994 dollars, something like that. So it's not, that is obviously a definition that could apply to a lot of different stuff. So any major redevelopment these days would probably hit that threshold if it's anything larger than a renovation of a single family home. So in theory, yes, this could apply to that. Although as Anthony mentioned, one of the things we were careful to do in the bill is try to carve out things that we think provide a substantial direct benefit to the actual overburdened community. So if the project, let's say, were to deliver affordable housing in Ivy City, that's something that would not be subject to additional scrutiny under this proposal.
Thanks so much, Connor. There's a question in the chat asking if the bill, is there anything in the bill that covers provisions to proactively create areas that improve local environment health, air quality, shade, etc., such as Miyawaki Gardens? I'm not familiar with, so I'll have to Google that. But I'm not aware of anything proactive in the bill in that regard. Connor can correct me if I'm wrong. That was one area that we were sort of flagging as as a need, and there's a discussion about how much do you put in one bill, of course, and does it fit neatly within this, or is it a separate piece of legislation? But we do think it's really urgent that there be, excuse me, a proactive assessment of the areas that are already overburdened, well-documented overburdened, and proactive plans be put in place, projects be put in place to address that, whether or not this, cumulative impacts legislation is triggered. So I wonder if Connor or others have ideas about how we can do that, and that's definitely an area that we're looking to push forward.
Yeah, on that front, I'll just say, it is frustrating how slow progress is, especially for those like you and Sabrina and others on the call who have been fighting this fight for too many years. There is good proactive work underway though. DDOT's urban forestry team does great work and is really focused on Ward 5 along with Casey Trees, which is like basically the private space counterpart. The district has updated its building codes and a lot of its sort of wastewater runoff and stormwater runoff requirements that are meaningfully moving the ball forward. The challenge is that those things only really kick into gear when there is land use change. And so that's not really changing a facility like a DPW lie down lot, let's say, that has a bunch of diesel trucks. And if nothing changes to that space, then there's no real opportunity to improve conditions there. I will say that something we do take on in the bill is the need to address the district's contributions to the environmental harm by making the comprehensive plan and other major agency planning processes subject to a version of the cumulative impact analysis. And I would describe that as proactive because we are pushing agencies to actually think about these issues. And, if they are proposing basically to continue to operate major sources of environmental harm in the same communities, that's something that would be flagged and that could be subject to a suspension of funding if there continues to be a disparate impact. What could we do eminent domain and go after every source of pollution in Ward 5 and 7 and 8? In theory, yes. In practice, that's extraordinarily expensive, probably implausibly expensive. And so I think on the proactive side, we need to think about what's realistic on that front and where we can, what resources we can bring to bear to push in that direction.
Question from Brianna James saying, how is this legislation different from the existing Environmental Policy Act? How does it address projects like the Brentwood Bus Terminal or NEP? And we really appreciate that question because we want to make sure that we're promoting legislation that makes a significant difference. I just want to put as background that Empower DC has had now 2 experiences with campaigns that dealt with the city not carrying out, not following the laws of the Environmental Policy Act. In both cases, the city was pushing forward a bus parking facility about a decade ago in Ivy City and now more recently in Brentwood. And there was no following of just the law right now requires this process of filling out a form to determine whether or not the project is qualifies for review of more of an environmental study. And had, in both cases, in one case, falsified the form, lied about the cost of the project. So it would not be considered a major action. They claimed it would be under the cost. And the second case, not done it at all. And it wasn't until residents sued that some studies were conducted, but we really questioned the legitimacy of those studies because, we had experts look at these studies that were used to justify these bus parking lots and to tell the public, oh, there's no, addition, this will not harm you, create any harm. But they were done, either in this Brentwood case, like not even looking at the right pollutants. In the case of the Ivy City one, they had actually repeated the study several times to come to their conclusion that they were looking for. Like I read all the footnotes and they were basically saying that they, kept manipulating the formula until they got the outcome that they were looking for. So it really calls into question, how does the district government police itself? Especially if it's a DC government project. I think the biggest change here is this is no longer looking at one project and only its impact. It's now looking at it in the context of the whole community and the cumulative nature of the existence of polluting industries. That's not something that has ever happened before. In fact, it's been quite the opposite, where the argument, if you do air testing, the argument will be, well, you can't blame this facility for all of that, right? And we've been up against that. So I think that's one of the key game changers. I think some of the enforcement mechanisms are key. I think that the role of the Office of People's Counsel could become very transformative, because right now there's absolutely no entity that you can really turn to navigate that whole process, like figure out even like what is the requirement of the Environmental Policy Act, how do I engage? And I think if we can really expand their role to understand that they should really be like in that consumer advocate role, like hand in hand with the community from the outside set of the project being proposed, and not just on the back end of appealing or fighting a bad decision, I think that could be really transformative, because we don't have anything like that in the city today. Does anybody else want to chime in on how this would tangibly be different from what we have now?
I just second everything you said. I think that was a great summary.
Okay. Great. All right. Now I will say that, like, we understand also that we have a broken system. Environmental justice issues are very intersectional, and that's why we're asking for this interagency council. We need to start moving towards, cross-pollination across agency, communication and coordination, because we need to be looking at health impact assessment, right? And that requires resources from the health department that we don't have in the city right now. We need to be looking at like the housing issues that were brought up, right? And the indoor air quality issues. And so we understand that this is one piece of a larger puzzle. And in fact, the puzzle itself, like this part of environmental assessment, is already quite broken. So I'm hoping that the scrutiny of adding this cumulative impact actually supports more accountability with environmental assessment as a whole. That there is a question mark really about the Environmental Policy Act as a whole and whether it's doing anything that we need it to do. And so hopefully this additional scrutiny will really help us fix and call attention to other aspects of the system that really need to be addressed. Okay, in regards to Brentwood, would it be possible to argue construction of the bus depot, since there is another one built less than a mile away on New York Avenue? So the issue with the bus terminal in Brentwood on W Street is the buses are moving from New York Avenue because that land is owned by a developer who has just been land banking it and making a bunch of money renting it to the city for decades. And meanwhile, they've been working to get their zoning approvals to allow them to build 10 stories on New York Avenue, which was now approved. And so now they're pushing the buses out because they're going to build some monstrosity over there. So what the city did was quietly, without informing anybody, purchase the land on W Street for the purpose of this bus terminal years prior to ever notifying the community that they were doing that. So one of the underlying issues there is that there's absolutely no planning of what would be an equitable approach to the placement of transportation facilities across the district. It is just jammed into wherever they see this industrial zoning. Oh, let's grab that land and let's put it there. Another example of that is in Ivy City, where about a decade ago, the city acquired another large plot of land along West Virginia Avenue to park all the diesel vehicles from DPW. And again, all of a sudden it was purchased, they were putting stuff there, nobody was told about it, and it just intensified and expanded that polluting impact of the city in those neighborhoods. Let's see, I'm looking for any other questions. Okay, Margot, I hear the health impacts aren't necessarily included because resources haven't existed in the past to adequately document issues and impacts. but is there either in this bill or wider advocacy for environmental justice consideration and inclusion of the sexual and reproductive health impacts caused by these legacy chemical industries and sites? Thank you for that question. I would say that the health impact arena is one that needs a lot of work. And there's work being done right now around the impacts of lead and housing conditions on asthma. But I have seen very little on any other type of health effect. And what we've encountered is, the Department of Health has an Office of Health Equity. They're very understaffed. They have just a couple of staff people, literally. There's no real process in the district that I'm aware of the city undertaking an intensive health study. There are some federal avenues for that we're looking into under the CDC. There's an avenue where you can petition for a health study that's more in depth. Perhaps it could be done also through universities, through maybe some of the medical institutions that exist. But that, I believe, is an area that we really need to dig into further. And I just want to echo the need, because we are coming against this all the time as well, right? Oh, well, it's a cancer causing facility. Can you prove that anybody got cancer? Well, in fact, we know generally that lots of people are getting cancer, but do we have that in-depth study that follows people over time, does the type of testing that can make those real conclusive results? No, we don't. And somebody can chime in. I'm just going back to the to the questions. How does the EJ Amendment Act cover projects below 1 million in cost? Does it only require applicants submitting major actions to consider the cumulative impact? Connor, you want to take that one?
So the answer is that there is a separate set of applicable facilities that Anthony covered earlier in the call. It's a relatively long list, but it includes minor sources of minor generators of air pollution, large lie down like parking lots. It includes sources of hazardous waste, transfer stations, the sorts of things that I think any reasonable person would say contribute to burdens in these communities. Obviously, folks are welcome to take a look at that list, and if there are other things that should be on there, that's great feedback to receive. But it does apply to things besides major actions.
And there's a couple of questions about the new division, Environmental Justice Division and DOEE. It sounded like it mostly relates to public outreach and research. Does it play a role in the new CIA process? And another question about that, has there been any indication of establishing an EJ advisory group of community members or something similar?
So I'll take those questions one by one. This division would have a responsibility for implementing regulations for this bill, as well as other responsibilities. The idea is that, obviously, as Anthony discussed at the beginning of this call, environmental justice means a lot more than just cumulative impacts and the particular problem we're trying to solve with this bill. It also means making sure agencies, including DOE, are having intentional conversations about what the impact of anything they're doing is going to have on communities like Ivy City, and proactively looking for ways to change it, to center the needs of and voices of residents who are most directly impacted. And so we just saw a need for there to actually be an institutional component of DOEE that is taking on that work. With regards to whether there should be an advisory committee or an interagency advisor or sort of coordination council, I think those are really interesting ideas and things that we just frankly didn't have time to consider when drafting the legislation. But I certainly see the value of those, and I would just ask that folks who are suggesting those, it's really helpful to for us to know what people think are valuable structures for those sorts of entities, because we have a lot of those in district government. And my candid perspective on, you know, advisory committees and interagency committees is that some of them are effective and some of them are really not, and just become kind of like a little bit of a backwater or a powerless body that isn't really, you know, isn't really vested with enough energy or authority to change the conversation. So for folks who are interested in those ideas, I think it would be helpful to understand, like, who specifically do you envision participating in those sorts of bodies, and what formal or informal powers do you think are necessary for them to be effective?
I'd like to chime in on that. You know, as a person who has been on an advisory council for environmental justice, I actually just finished my term for the state of Pennsylvania's Environmental Justice Advisory Board. And, you know, this is a board that essentially is a mix of, you know, well, I was the youngest person on the board, so I'm not even gonna say young and older people, but I would say a mix of, you know, people who are actual residents and people who actually, you know, work at the environmental agency in Pennsylvania. And what we've done was oversee, you know, any action that like the agency is like looking towards to doing, you know, making sure that we're asking the right questions when, you know, whenever a specific like division within the agency has anything dealing with the environmental justice, you know, they'll come to us first. We will review their action and ask the questions and will require any updates, you know, relating to that. So I do think, you know, I think the environmental justice division is probably one of the aspects that I am personally most excited about, because I feel like by then we will have a real sense of what equity looks like. You know, DOEE talks about equity all the time, but if they're not centering environmental justice dealing with equity, then how are we actually addressing equity? So I think with the environmental justice division, you know, like we said before, it will ensure that this community process will be happening. You know, we've already seen multiple examples of the lack of the community processes and the community being involved within these different processes. So at least we will have a specific aspect of that agency that we could hold accountable and say, hey, why aren't they doing X, Y, Z, and how can we, you know, further this?
Thank you. Yeah, I think the advisory board component is also a piece that was possibly conceived of to be part of the interagency council that we would love to see created at some point. Because that could be a way to make sure, again, part of the issue with EJ is, again, it's intersectional, nobody's taking responsibility for it, and you get just sent from, you know, ping ponged from one agency to the next, you know, no, that's not us, talk to them. And then they're not communicating with each other. Sabrina, did you want to chime in on that?
I just want to say something. All of us that are on here, we're on here for a reason. And it's because we all feel the same way. We know, everybody here knows that we are working to hold folks accountable, DOEE and the other agencies. As Parisa stated, we did sue the city a couple times for the wrongs that they have done. And now that we're having this bill to be passed, and I'm putting it out there that it's going to be passed, we need to be proactive. Like I had said earlier, we can't allow these NEPs in Fort Myers to be in our community. We have to do something now. We have to get together now. We have to put our heads together. Everybody, even our neighbors, we need to talk to our neighbors. We need to get our neighbors involved. You know, Zook said that, someone mentioned earlier about housing conditions. We can do something about that. Zook said that's indoor air pollution. That would qualify under the air quality division, I would think, but that's something that we can add as well. But we need the numbers. We need the numbers.
Yeah, I want to also just thank Ms. Rogers, who's in the chat, you know, continuously lifting up the housing issues, which are so critical. And just to mention that, you know, tonight we're focused on this bill and sort of the industrial land issues we've been working on, but we do have a housing campaign. And so I hope, if you're interested in joining or getting more information about those issues, you reach out to us. I can put you in touch with our organizers who are working with tenants. There's things that can be done. It's not enough, and it's hard work, unfortunately, to get accountability and clean up, but there are mechanisms. So like Sabrina was saying, if people are willing to act, we are there to support and be part of that and help uplift your cause. So please do reach out to us. Yeah, a lot of tenants across the city are becoming very frustrated with a lot of dead ends everywhere, not just Department of Buildings, OAG, the courts. It's become very difficult. There are some legislative ideas circulating about, how to make it harder for some landlords to do business in the district and things like that. But we certainly, if we have more of a presence of tenants, impacted tenants who are willing to organize with us, and unfortunately, these issues, the work is long. Takes a little longevity, a few years of consistency to make sure we can get that that outcome. And I see a hand up. Ms. Perkins, do you want to unmute? I think we have a little bit of time to take a couple comments. You're still muted. I'm not sure if you were here. Let's see. You're still on mute right now. Try one more time. Yeah, I'm going to push this button that says ask to unmute and see if it pops up something for you.
Are you on a phone?
Yeah, *6 to unmute on the phone, I think. You might be on the app, though. That's, I think, if you're calling in. Okay, maybe we'll come back to you in a second. Berlin, you want to make a brief comment or question?
It's on YouTube.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I appreciate what everybody's going in the direction that they're going. I'm glad I got a little involved and just listening to the presentation in the beginning and the goals that you guys are trying to achieve, with this bill. I was letting Sabrina know that I've already registered, to testify. The context of my testimony is basically going to shine a little light, on my experience in the environment in terms of some of the things that you have allowed me to do, Parissa, and going into some of these houses or apartments, that either had mold issues or some other issues. It's important that the things that we're fighting on for are inside and outside. I just wanted to pull the ears of the people to let them understand, that throughout Washington, D.C., the insides of some of these older homes and apartments and so forth are filled with toxins, of hazards, to people's health. And most of them, the tenants can't do anything about it, but some of these older buildings have things, like asbestos, lead pipes, lead paint, a lot of things. And when these buildings, get raised, when they're removed for, raised for new construction, take for example that new soccer stadium over in Southwest. There was, as far as I could tell, there was no abatement program over there. For the monstrous amount of pollution that was going on, just raising some of the apartment buildings and so forth. So I don't want to be too long-winded, but I just wanted to, in my presentation of this testimony, I would certainly encourage interagency coordination, because if one agency, is blind to what's going on in one part of the city than the other, it would be very difficult for for something to be pointed out and adjusted, for the sake of everybody in the city.
Thank you, Berlin. I'm gonna interrupt just to make sure we're good on time. And I just want to thank you for uplifting again the issue of demolition, which is one of the things that wasn't explicitly mentioned in the bill, but we would like to see demolition looked at for its cumulative impact. As you mentioned, especially in Buzzard Point, that was a major issue affecting the community there.
Right.
Ms. Perkins, I saw you come off mute for a sec. Did you still have a comment you wanted to make? There you go.
Yeah. Hi, how everybody doing this evening?
Good.
Today is speaking from lived experience, and I'm going through it right now. I was caught up in the middle of when they decided to take DCRA and divide it. And I had things in place where they had came in, they did an inspection. I had Healthy Homes also to come in and do an inspection because I have a son with asthma and we have issues in our unit. So when that happened, they came in, and they supposed to have come back and they didn't. So I reached out to them and they sent somebody back, and a lot of my records got lost and they only targeted certain things. So I had went to Legal Aid Society and I have legal representation. I had them to come in and look, and so I had to kind of start the process all over again. And also due to the pandemic and people working from home, they said that they sent me out information to attend court. I never received it. All I received was the information saying that because I didn't attend, I had so many days to reinstate my case. So I'm currently reinstating my case, and I've been working on this since 2022, and I am not giving up because that's not what I do. So right now, my son is still, we still in the same environment that we were in before. He has asthma. I've been making sure his triggers have been very minimal, but that's a lot of work. But also, if you give up, then you're giving in, and that's not what I'm doing. So because of that division, it's caused a lot of people to give up. Mm-hmm. And if they're not educated or they're not a part of what we're doing right now, they feel like they lost. And we cannot have people losing. We have to make sure we're educating our tenants. Even the landlords need to be educated because they need to see certain things as well. Because we don't want to always classify somebody as a slumlord. We're going to say they're a no-lord because they don't know. And unless they know, they cannot help. And so to educate them as well to prevent things from happening to our tenants and our newborn babies and our pregnant people and our elderly people, it's very important that they have this vital information, because when it all boils down to it, they're going to be held accountable. But we have to make sure we stand firm and stand strong. So right now, I'm in the middle of it, and I'm not giving up. And I just resubmitted my paperwork, and I'm waiting for my court date. And when I get it, I'm going to let y'all know what happened.
Please do let us know. And we, are grateful for your fighting spirit. And you're right. You have a lot of great points there. So thank you so much for that.
No, thank you for allowing me to share my personal experience, but I would like to keep you guys updated.
Please do. Please do. Yeah, we want to learn from it and help in whatever ways we can. Anthony's going to take us, I think, towards our next closing steps.
Yes, thank you all for your amazing questions and showing up today. So again, as a reminder, please sign up today to prepare for your testimony and to submit testimony for the March 18th hearing. You are always more than welcome to schedule any one-on-ones with me to just learn more about our work or different ways that we can support you all. And, just to get to know each other. We are all in this fight together. We are all DC residents. This is something that's the environment doesn't just impact one person, it impacts all of us. So I'm definitely willing to help you all at every step of the way. Call me whenever, just not late hours, and we can definitely get something working. Again, testify in the March 18th hearing. More information will come out, post the hearing during the bill markup phase. And lastly, we do have another event coming up in late April. We are hosting our first Environmental Justice Summit, April 27th. So we definitely would love you all to attend. This is the flyer for it. We will definitely be sending out more information in the coming weeks. So again, this date will be March 27th. This will take place at 945 G Street Northwest, starting at 10, up until 5 p.m. We're talking about, handing out more information about our work and just all the environmental work within the DC area, talking about action steps, talking about accountability, and, providing some technical assistance for you all. We are the representatives for the Region 3 TIC-TAC. Marisa, we could tell them what that acronym stands for.
The TIC-TAC is the EPA's new program, stands for Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers. And what they've done is divide up the country into different regions. And by region, there's groups that are leading efforts to provide capacity building or technical assistance on environmental justice issues. So we're part of the Region 3. We work alongside other groups in the region, and we're hoping to bring trainings and workshops on, some of the topics that we've covered today. Just to increase all of our knowledge and understanding of what's in place now, and also to help us change it and make it much better for all of our communities.
Yes, so please save the date for that. You can register for the event at our website at empowereddc.org/events. So that, registration is live now. So please go ahead and secure your spot. It's not limited, but just secure it so we know you're coming. And then, yeah, that really does conclude our presentation. Again, I want to thank you all for showing up. I definitely want to thank Connor Shaw for being here to answer some of the questions. And yeah, this is my contact information. You can connect with us on social media, visit our websites. And I guess that's it. I hope you all have a good night.
And we'll see you hopefully at the hearing on Monday. Right?
Yes, again, register today.
Yes, please register. Hope to see many of you there. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good night.
Come off mute. Say good night. Say bye.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you. Great meeting.
Bye.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks
Thanks.
for coming.
Thanks,
Have a good one,
everybody.
everyone.
Talk to you soon.